the Less Wrong posts. First one we have today is update yourself incrementally. Does anyone want to launch into this?
It's okay if your cherished belief isn't perfectly defended. If the hypothesis is that the coin comes up heads 95% of the time, then one time in 20 you'll expect to see what looks like contrary evidence. Yet, it is widely believed, especially in the court of public opinion, that a true theory can have no failures, and a false theory no successes.
Yes. So you find people holding up a single piece of what they think of an evidence and claiming that their theory can explain it as though this was all the support they needed. And apparently a false theory can have no supporting evidence. So I guess we run into this a lot with, not a lot anymore, but we ran into it a lot with 9/11 truthers, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of conspiracy theories are people just anomaly hunting.
Yeah.
Well, what about this?
Yeah.
Well, what about this?
How do you explain that? Well, my theory can explain it, so
Yeah.
it can't be a false theory.
It's just people are very uncomfortable with saying that that's a coincidence. That's also a coincidence, and it's like kind of, linking back to the anthropic principle episode we had last time. We're hardwired to look for causality as a species.
And I think the important thing to, and like a rationalist technique to apply to, in the case of especially anomaly hunting and conspiracy theories, is like if you didn't predict it in advance,
Yeah.
that I don't know what all the coincidences that they point to in the 9/11 stuff, but like if your model didn't have that already in advance, then you weren't modeling this at all. You were just like,
Yeah, you're just
after the
post
fact
facto
nitpicking.
pointing at weird things and going, oh, what about that? That's something that I've seen brought up recently with some shoddy science, where there's a bunch of ways you can do science bad, and something that is getting more attention lately that I'm pretty happy about is people pointing out that you did not theorize this ahead of time. So people will do, I don't know, it's like a study about asthma, and they didn't have any kind of hypothesis ahead of time. It's just then, like, after the fact, they're looking at it and being like, oh, look, it looks like, I don't know, you can skew the data this way to make it look like the drug that we're testing helped in these ways. And it's like, did you predict that that was the thing that this drug was going to do? If no, then, like, that's useless.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that is stressed throughout this post is that beliefs generally shouldn't be binary on-off. A theory is either true or false, that they should be held with a certain probability, like 95% confidence that this coin comes up heads 95% of the time, something like that. Because one of the things that he mentions is that even with a correct model, if it is not an exact model, you will sometimes need to revise your belief down. If an iota or two of evidence happens to counter-support your belief, that's okay. Just shift your belief downward a little. If it's true, supporting evidence will come in shortly and the probability will climb again. If the theory is false, you didn't really want it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've found myself getting really uncomfortable with that, or rather, I've, caught myself and tried to fix it, but, darn, there was a recent example, but I can't think of it. But, when, oh, no, I remember it. About, Roundup. So, I was getting really frustrated with people talking about that, Roundup being toxic, and I looked it up at the time, and I was like, no studies have shown that Roundup is toxic. The mechanism of action doesn't even make sense for it being toxic. It, deletes an enzyme from a plant that lets it photosynthesize. You don't photosynthesize. But, last night I was, having this argument with people, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is a big pet peeve of mine. And somebody said, well, actually, there have been some studies recently that had a possible connection to carcinogenicity. So I was like, all right, show me. And then they did, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now you get to revise slightly. Yeah, in the downward
but
direction.
I noticed myself wanting to start defending my point,
right?
So I didn't look dumb or something. And then it's like, oh, that's not a good impulse.
You did a good thing. You were a good rationalist.
Yay!
Congratulations. Yeah. He says that. Well, the way he ends this post is that maybe some more counter support comes in just a tiny bit. So you rise down again just a little bit, and new upward support is slow to trickle in. You may find your belief drifting further and further downward, until finally you realize from which quarter the winds of evidence are blowing against you. In that moment of realization, there's no point in constructing excuses. In that moment of realization, you have already relinquished your cherished belief. So by, slowly just updating a little bit, you can get yourself to becoming less wrong without even having to have a major, existential struggle over it.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Yes. He did mention earlier up, which I didn't re-quote, but the rationality is not for winning debates, it is for deciding which side to join.
Oh yeah, that's a good line.
Yeah. If you've already decided which side to argue for, the work of rationality is done within you, whether well or poorly.
Yeah, it's worth noticing when you do have a position on something and you're not sure how you got that strong of a position on it, trying to trace your line of thinking backwards and being like, did I get this from first principles? Did I look this up? Or is this just something that I'd heard repeated by authority figures enough times or something like that? It's another thing I'm trying to notice too. Like,
I think that's part of the reason he tries to distance rationality from political stuff, or at least did at the time, because politics is much more about winning debates.
yeah.
And if you're trying to figure out which side of the debate to argue from first, then that's a slightly different thing.
Yeah, well, I
which
think
is
that
what
was
rationality
mainly...
was meant to be for.
I think that was mainly like politics is a really bad area to start in because we're just, as a species, so hardwired for tribalism.
Yeah.
It's better to, like... yeah, and that was the other thing that I had forgotten about the... politics is the mind killer, was that he actually says, like, this is for advanced rationalists, not, we don't talk about politics around here at all ever. It's just more, if you're just new to this, you're just starting out, like, hone your skills in the areas of scientific fact, or, like, something that's less stabbing directly into your soul first. Anyway.
No, and I think that's, I mean, I'm looking forward to the Politics is the Mind Killer series when we get there. They kind of come up
Didn't we already cover it?
sparsely. Yeah, but I think some of more of the points like keep coming up like that, and I like that admonition about, like, this isn't something that we can't not discuss. This isn't something that we just don't discuss. It's just like, this is a really shitty intro move, right? I mean, it's antithetical to a good approach for an outsider, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Let
let
me
me
say after having argued about politics 20 minutes ago.
Well, that's because
That's
I
'cause you're an
mean,
advanced
we're also here having
rationalist.
fun. Yeah, well, I was almost going to say that, but I'm not going to pat myself on the back like that. But what I will say is that, like, we're not. I mean, we well, A, I didn't know we were starting the episode.
No.
B, that was more a discussion among friends. And,
Yeah.
like, if I was trying to tell somebody, like, oh yeah, here's what this is about, and here's how it applies to your favorite candidate for president.
Oh,
like,
God, that'd be the worst idea.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, another thing I did want to point out with this one is I like when these posts get self-referential. This one said, this one linked to people wanting their debates to be one-sided, which is an earlier post, debate should not appear one-sided. What was that one titled?
I think so. I think
Okay.
that's the name, yeah.
Yeah, that's a benefit that you do get from reading the sequences in order.
Yeah, he covers previous concepts and
Yeah,
then
it
reuses
keeps
them going
building on
forward.
them until you've got this much bigger model in your head than you started out with. That's why sometimes I do find it frustrating to, like, try to say that, it's like, oh yeah, there's this whole thing about how you shouldn't want your debates to be one-sided, and then I'll link the original post, and I'm like, this doesn't look as strong as I remembered it being. This just
Right.
kind of seems like, well, there's
It's
also the
because
thing
there was
where,
all
like,
this stuff building up to it.
yeah. It's hard to get all that context there. It's like, well, you really have to just read the sequence.
Damn it.
That's a lot of text, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like he's trying to bridge a very large inferential gaps and has to do a lot of work to get there.
Yeah. Let's
Moving on
move
to
on.
Yeah.
One argument against an army. Suppose the country of Fredonia is debating whether its neighbor, Sylvania, is responsible for a recent rash of meteor strikes on its cities. The meteor struck cities close to the Sylvanian border. There was unusual activity in the Sylvanian stock markets before the strikes, and the Sylvanian ambassador, Trentino, was heard muttering about heavenly vengeance. And then you encounter some arguments by pro-Sylvania traders, again and again and again, but each time the new argument's handily defeated 3-1.
Can I really quickly interject?
Yes.
I cut out a part in the middle where it said that a pro-Sylvania trader, in quotes, approaches you and says, but look, it doesn't make any sense for the comet strikes to be the work of Sylvania because of this. And I don't know, they point out something from astronomy, right? Like, meteors are very, very hard for humans to direct. It would be basically impossible. And you go, yeah, but they all hit cities close to the border. And there was unusual activity in the stock market beforehand. And the ambassador did talk about heavenly justice just before this happened. So, I got my 3 points of evidence against your one that, like, we think humans don't know how to do this yet, but maybe they do. So I'm going to stick with my argument here because, it just seems there's more weight to this side.
Yeah, 3-1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, by rehearsing the arguments you already knew, you're double counting your evidence.
Yeah, and then people keep coming to you with another argument. And each time you're like, yeah, but I got these 3 against your one. And then someone comes with another one. And it says, and on every occasion, you feel yourself becoming more confident that Sylvania was indeed responsible, shifting your prior according to the felt balance of evidence.
Because it's 3-1 every time.
Yeah.
But by the end of the week, it's 30-3. But you're not thinking of it that way because you're not keeping score. This reminds me of a similar post where it was like a religious, like a intelligent design argument or something, and like every time they'd be confronted with a new piece of anti-information, they'd give back the intelligent design spiel, and they'd be like, aha, I need to feed another and another and another. I think it was just a similar point about like cognitive stop signs or something, but it's the same sort of failure.
Yeah.
And he ties this back right into the previous post, which is why we grouped them together, saying that the balance of evidence may still support your cherished belief, but you still have to shift the probability down, yes, down, from whatever it was before you heard the contrary evidence. It does no good to just rehearse the supporting arguments because you have already taken those into account. So if someone does make a contrary point, even if you think it's not a good point and your points are, better and outweigh it, you still should adjust down just a little bit. So that if you keep getting all these little arguments over time, they can build up to, bring you to where a 30-3 should be.
Yeah. This reminds me of the arguments as soldiers, which I think we covered earlier too. This is the kind of mindset where you're not thinking about how to debate like factual facts correctly. You're thinking about, I've got these 3 magic items, and every time someone comes at me with a new magic item, I'm going to use these 3, and they keep working, so I'm just going to keep using them. Haha, I've got my 3 magic, but like it's, you're not trying to win a fight.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be the point of what you're doing. Like, if you're actually trying to find out the truth, then that is just a very wrong way to think about how to do it.
So, speaking of wrong ways to think about how to do this, if I'm in dialogue with a moon landing denier, they will have, if they make a living out of it, like some people do, they'll have 4,000 arguments about why the moon landing was fake, and I've got like 3 about why it was real. So, like, for every one that I hear, I've got to update down a little bit in my confidence that the moon landing happened.
I mean, depending. First of all, if it's an argument with some validity, then yes, you probably should update down a little bit. Just how little that little bit is might be very little if it's really weak. But there's also some arguments that you can dismiss by actually looking at the argument.
Yeah.
Like looking at this and being like, no, this argument counts for 0 because it's so bad because of, reason X, Y, or Z. I think this is more like you cannot use the arguments you already know to be like, I see, maybe you have a point there, but I have all this other evidence on the other side, so I'm going to ignore that point. It has to be,
this is
if it is a somewhat valid point to take into consideration.
This is a particular analogy that's trying to get at the heart of why this style of trying to argue is not actually useful for getting towards the truth of something, but just because they're talking about the numerical error that some people make, that like there's also the point that this is like physically impossible for people to have done argument should actually win. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's 1 to 3 arguments, like, oh, but it looks suspicious, versus this is physically impossible to have. Like, obviously that argument's going to defeat any other, like, but this is weird and isn't that weird, but you're like, this is still physically impossible. You could just keep using that argument because,
or if that moon landing denier has like extremely good evidence, one single piece of evidence could overrule everything else. You could be like, oh shit, you're right. Even if it's just one argument, if it's that good of an argument.
Yeah, this is much more valuable from the perspective of a moon landing denier with bad arguments, where they're like, well, the flag looks like it moves for a minute. And like, if they just said that to every counterpiece, every piece of information about why you think the moon landing happened, they're like, but the flag moved a little bit, I think. So
of course it moved a little bit. They were planting it.
Well, but I mean, that's one of the things that they say. Like, flags don't wave in space. How did it blow in the wind? And it's like, it didn't. There was a supporting pole.
Yeah.
Or like the dust. This this would be like a good counterpoint to that. So like you say, like, well, yeah, but if you watch them jump, and then you watch the dust move at like 1/6 G, like what, do they got string to all that dust? Was this early CGI? Like,
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, I remember people would say that the lighting looks like stage lighting, and they're like, "Yeah, the shadows are weird. The lighting's." I'm like, "Yeah, no shit, it's weird. The atmosphere's different." Like,
yeah, the lighting looks weird. It's on the fucking moon. Yeah, we don't have lights like that on Earth.
I think someone looked into how much it would cost Kubrick to, because they say Kubrick directed the moon landing, how much it would cost Kubrick to do those kind of special effects, and basically it would be impossible. But if it had been possible, it would be cheaper to go to the moon than it would be to fake the moon landing.
Yeah. Well, they brought rocks back. It's like, yeah, but we've had meteorite strikes in Antarctica, and that could be moon rocks. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, come on.
Man.
That's actually something.
Yeah, but like if I go there, take pictures, and then bring back the
Right.
ones that I took pictures of, and it's like, oh, you just brought those to the set in LA, and it's like, no, come on, man. I don't know. I lost I don't know if I ever had fun. Well, no, I must have for a couple of years had fun debating with like conspiracy theorists, but then it's just like arguing with with religious creationists or something. You hear the same arguments over
they're
and
not
over.
arguing in good faith. That's
And-
always so frustrating.
Yeah, it's more just like a spectacle sport. I think even for them, like I probably know people who are 9/11 truthers, but I don't know
Definitely is.
anyone that I have had that discussion with in like the last 10 years. But like if they really believed it, they seem to have like way too much fun with it. Then
Yeah.
it's like if you thought like, oh yeah, the things are really actually scary and nefarious like that.
No, I distinctly remember my sister at one point hearing some moon hoax arguments and deciding, "Oh, I'm going to be a moon hoaxer now too because this is funny." Like she like just decided to say that she didn't believe the moon landing was real as a quirky part of her identity now that she could like argue with people about. But like not because she thought that any of the evidence was compelling, but more just because it like seemed like, oh, I could be a wacky eccentric moon person, and that's appealing to me.
I read a great article how it's a lot more about the community and the identity than about the belief itself.
Well, I mean,
The belief is a starting off point, but
people
then
could
once
say
you
the same
get-
thing about us in like AI.
I suppose.
But the difference, we're all perfectly sane. So.
Oh yeah. All right. Do we have more to say about that one?
No, he just ended it with saying, with the right kind of wrong reasoning, a handful of support, or even a single argument can stand off an army of contradictions. And thus the name of the post.
Yeah.
All right, so for next time, we will be talking about hindsight bias and hindsight devalues science, which is the names of the two posts.